Hey there, Tycho. We're going to get started in just a minute here, everyone. Thank you for joining in Bitcoin Dialogues Episode 2. We're in for a great session today. Andre's in the chat. Let's see. I'm going to give him mic access, and we're going to get things started here. Andre, hello there. Let's see if we can get his mic going as well. But before we kick things off, I'm going to give a bit of a brief background here. Just for anybody who's new in the audience, if this is your first time joining in, I'm going to give a little bit of a background on exactly what we're doing here with Bitcoin Dialogues. And so at that, I'd like to say hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Bitcoin Dialogues featuring Stacks, Zest Protocol, and Stacking DAO. We're in for a really great episode today. So we see across the Bitcoin landscape that there's really a large number of teams that are developing and building innovative products, and that the landscape is growing fast. And at DIA, we see this as a very interesting wave of innovation and a prospect for growth. And so as we partner with more Bitcoin-related chains and dApps and look to expand our presence in the Bitcoin landscape, we've launched this series to bring visibility to the Bitcoin landscape, helping both us and anyone in the audience, of course, in the community to better navigate all of the rapid growth that is occurring. And today is going to be a really great episode because we certainly have some of the OGs in the Bitcoin landscape here on the call. So at that, I'd like to say welcome to Andre, who's the product lead at Stacks, and Tycho, who's co-founder of Zest Protocol and Stacking DAO. Tycho, we've already heard from you today. I see your mic's set up and well. How about you over there, Andre? How's everything?
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Awesome. Yeah, loud and clear. Loud
Awesome.
and
Good to
clear.
be here.
Definitely great to have you. Thank you in advance for joining on the call today. And since we've got you guys set up with mic access, I'd love to just kick things right off here. And we always like to start with a brief round of introductions, getting to know our speakers a little bit, setting the tone for the call. So Andre and then maybe Tycho following, if you don't mind, before we actually get into the details of each project, could you guys just tell us a little bit about your background, perhaps in the crypto industry, how long you've been building here, maybe a little bit about your work experience prior to the projects you're working on now, and how long you've been working with the projects you're working on now.
Yeah, sure thing. So I've been working in the crypto space for quite a while now. I basically started researching and investing in crypto in early 2017 through a company that I had set up at the time. Funny enough, I actually invested in the Stacks Reggae token sale around that time. So it was the first SEC qualified token sale, and that was kind of my entry point into the Stacks ecosystem. So I've been in the ecosystem for a while. I've worked on various projects, and basically all of that was before joining the Stacks Foundation at the beginning of 2023, basically focused on building SBTC, which is a decentralized Bitcoin bridge. So, I've worn a couple different hats in the ecosystem, but it's good to be here now.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for the background. Super cool to kind of have an experience as an investor and then be able to get your hands on, actually helping to build out the product. And we're definitely going to dive into SBTC today. So thanks for setting the stage on that, Andre. Tycho, how about you? Could you give us a little bit of background on yourself as well?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, I guess I'm co-founder of Zest Protocol, which is a lending protocol built for Bitcoin, and it basically directly ties into what Andre just mentioned, like SBTC and the Stacks Nakamoto release. That's essentially what Zest Protocol will leverage to create like a fully, Bitcoin native lending experience. Um, and yeah, and then as well, started building Stacking DAO, which is like the LST on Stacks. So think of it like Lido on Stacks or like Cheeto on Stacks, right? And people can mint ST Stacks and thereby, deploy their STX in DeFi without foregoing their stacking yield. And stacking DAO is also very important to kind of help support the network and onboard, and a wide range of different validators and, help that ecosystem, be very, very healthy. But prior to this, I was also working at a Stacks core entity, an entity called Trust Machines, and was also very closely involved with the Stacks Nakamoto release and SBTC, like together with Andre. So yeah, like very much worked on that too, and Andre has been doing a lot more work there as well since I focused on building DeFi, but yeah, also have a pretty deep background in all things stacks and Bitcoin L2s, and now trying to leverage that to create really exciting experiences for users.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for that background. I think obviously it's gonna be a very great call today as we have, the perspective of Andre speaking on behalf of Stacks now himself, but and also I want to confirm, should I say Tycho or Tycho? I don't want to call you the wrong name.
Tycho, that's
Oh,
right.
Tycho,
That's
perfect.
absolutely
And
right.
then we have Tycho, who, as he mentioned, worked early contributions to the Nakamoto release and specifically SBTC. So I think the layout that we should go down today is, let's start with a bit of a high level on Stacks itself, really set the stage for Stacks' presence within the Bitcoin landscape and how it might compare to other Bitcoin L2s, and then we can dive in and get some more insights from Tycho on the dApp perspective and bringing in your added perspective from actually having contributed to the development of the Nakamoto release, SBTC, and then how you'll integrate that into the dApps you're building now. So at that, one more kind of high level question here for you, Andre, before we dive into any technical details, but I think it's really interesting to take a look at Stacks, which is the leading layer 2 blockchain built on Bitcoin. Stacks was founded in early 2021. And this is a time when, and please do disagree if you kind of feel that my argument here is incorrect, but this is a time when arguably the Bitcoin narrative and the interest to build on Bitcoin was arguably not as widespread and popular as it is right now. So I'd love to hear from you, Andre. Could you share with us a bit about this journey over the years? I'd be super curious to hear how the team came together with this idea at the time and what the original vision for Stacks was, and maybe how this vision has changed and or remained the same over the years, as we're now in this sort of time when it seems like the whole hype train is surrounding building on Bitcoin, but you guys have been building on Bitcoin, even before this started, from my perspective. So would love to hear your thoughts on this and how the vision has evolved over the years.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, interestingly enough, while the Stacks mainnet launched in early 2021, the project actually started much earlier than that. So it actually started out as basically as part of the Princeton Computer Science Department. So Munib was basically working on his PhD thesis at the time, and this was really the crux of the thesis that he worked on. That was where he met his co-founder Ryan Shea to start building Blockstack, as well as some of the early Stacks core contributors like Jude Nelson, who's a researcher there at the time. And so, the sort of like V0 or V1 was basically a company called Blockstack back in the day. The vision was really around creating a decentralized internet on Bitcoin. And really, I think core to this idea is that Bitcoin is the best foundation to basically build this decentralized web, and we could build a better version of the internet to improve upon some of the shortcomings of L2. And if we share this vision for the decentralized web, Bitcoin is just simply the best foundation to build this because of its security and resilience. When we look at Bitcoin, it has been the most battle-tested protocol over the years. It settles a significant amount of volume every year, and so that basically just makes it a very reliable foundation. So if you're a developer looking to build an application in DeFi, building it on that most reliable base layer was really part of the thesis. And there were even additional theses around that time, basically that like all of the innovation that we see happening around the broader crypto industry would eventually find its way back to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin could essentially adopt some of the best and most desirable features that we see being built around DeFi. That was certainly, I think, in some cases proven right in starting in 2023 with the release of ordinals and Stacks sort of gaining more popularity around that. But I guess backing up for a second, one of the big unlocks there, I think, when the Stacks mainnet launched was this proof of transfer protocol. So Stacks was basically the first protocol to basically implement this new consensus, and it was based on a derivative of a consensus algorithm called proof of burn, where you would basically burn the base asset. And in that case, you could look at BTC. And what the core developers realized was that burning Bitcoin in this case wasn't a good use of capital, right? Like BTC is precious. And instead, they realized that you could transfer that Bitcoin to bootstrap a new network. And so that's kind of how Stacks was born with this proof of transfer protocol, where miners are actually bidding Bitcoin and recycling the energy or proof of work that has gone into securing Bitcoin to bootstrap a new network. And so that's led to some of the unique features of Stacks, which is that you can actually earn a native Bitcoin yield by just locking up STX tokens. We can go into more detail on that, but basically, I think like the takeaway here is that like for a long time, like when we were building this throughout this time, it was very contrarian to be building on Bitcoin, especially like last bull market to some extent and during the bear. But I think that we're starting to see like how this thesis was kind of hiding in plain sight, right? Like Bitcoin is just the largest asset and it's the most liquid and just very desirable ecosystem to build on. And so I think that's why we're starting to see a lot of this attention being paid on the Bitcoin ecosystem. And Stacks has been there, kind of in the trenches, grinding away throughout the bear market. So that's kind of how I see how things kind of evolved over the past few years and how we got here.
Awesome. Thank you, Andre. And I want to stick with you for this next one here because it's sort of a perfect segue in that, you reference sort of these initial visions and sort of the birth of Stacks and to sort of, lay the path for where it is today. Also referencing the large amount of new layer twos, new apps, and even new token standards like ordinals and upcoming runes, that are now being built on Bitcoin. I think, as you referenced, this landscape is a lot more vibrant than it was, even a couple of years ago. And so let's stick with that context. And I think it's a great time to maybe set the tone for, comparing, contrasting Stacks from some of these other alike, let's say, smart contract platforms that are built to scale, and ultimately create the opportunity to build and deploy dApps that settle on Bitcoin. So, talking about that, Andre, from looking at, let's say, layer 2 chains, how would Stacks or how does Stacks differentiate itself amongst this competition?
Yeah, sure. So when I think about it, there's a couple of really key features that define what a good Bitcoin L2 would look like, and I think Stacks has really tried to take a first principle approach about how do you build something like this. So I think to start, I think a key part of this innovation is a protocol that we've been developing called SBTC. So that has really been designed with an open and permissionless signer set from the beginning. So it really differentiates itself from other Bitcoin L2s that we've seen in the market that rely on more federated designs. And so being able to have a decentralized way to use Bitcoin on the Stacks network is a key part of, I think, what makes this all possible. And then when we start to look at upgrades like Nakamoto, I think when we start to think about the way that it can inherit Bitcoin security and offer improved scalability benefits to Bitcoin. So, and what that means basically, so one of the features, and I know we'll get into this more later, but one of the features that you get with Nakamoto is that the Stacks blockchain will actually fork with Bitcoin. So it receives this, it inherits a lot of the security benefits from transacting on the Bitcoin L1. And what that means very concretely is that the Stacks network will inherit Bitcoin's finality faster than any other chain could. And so, depositing Bitcoin or redeeming Bitcoin from Stacks can happen in a fraction of the time, whereas most chains have to wait around 6 blocks to receive that confirmation time, because Stacks is sort of aware of Bitcoin and is kind of been built around Bitcoin. That'll be done in a fraction of the time. So basically, you have faster peg in and peg outs of Bitcoin, better security, and of course, again, that a lot of it is made possible through that proof of transfer protocol, where essentially you have an open and permissionless network of signers that are responsible for the liveness of the Stacks blockchain and also for processing these Bitcoin deposit and withdrawal transactions. And for performing this really critical service for the network, they are actually earning Bitcoin as a reward for this. So I think just like when you look at Stacks, faster Bitcoin transfers, more expressive development environments with Bitcoin sort of security and finality. That's really the vision of what we're doing here.
Yeah, it's great. You touched on a ton of things there, specifically referencing the Nakamoto release. And so I think it's a great time to bring Tycho in and add some more context here on his perspective. As I referenced earlier in the call, Tycho was previously held the role as product lead for SBTC, for the Stacks Nakamoto release. So I think great to bring you in, Tycho. I mean, we just heard from Andre how this is, kind of going to enable Stacks to inherit Bitcoin's finality faster, improve the security, and how this is all sort of made possible through proof of transfer. Is there anything that you would add here in terms of just kind of providing some general context for what the Nakamoto release is? And if not, if we covered all that, then I'd love to dive into your perspective on SBTC, maybe sharing us how this will impact both the Stacks ecosystem, but also the dApps such as Zest Protocol and Stacking DAO that are building on top of it. Tycho, thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's good timing because I actually wrote a thread about this yesterday, so I just put it up in case anyone wants to have a look later. It's a famous plug. Best threads on Tycho.btc. But no, I mean, I think like the sort of the way to think about this is like that. It's sort of all like, well, okay, actually, let's sort of really zoom out, right? Like if you're a builder, you can build on Ethereum L2, you can build on Solana, or you can build on a Bitcoin L2. Now, why on earth would you want to be on a Bitcoin L2 when the infrastructure is sort of, quite bad compared to the rest? Well, you'd want to be on a Bitcoin L2 because you want to unlock BTC liquidity, right? That's kind of like the real reason why people are, or like why people would want to build on Bitcoin L2s. And that's also maybe a bit why maybe the first version of Stacks, that was launched, maybe didn't fully get product market fit, right? Because you need not just compute secured by Bitcoin is maybe not enough. You need to actually unlock that BTC liquidity somehow, right? And it needs to be faster, of course. That's important too. But I think the kind of way that this went was it was very much thought from the perspective of SBTC. It was okay, how do we unlock BTC liquidity? Hey, actually, all these sort of stackers or stakers on the Stacks network, we should maybe also make them perform kind of deposit and withdrawal functions, right? Make them be a bridge at the same time, and force them to. And then you have like a lot of capital at stake, and you can actually, have BTC liquidity on an L2, like in a decentralized way. So that was, I think, very much the first kind of the first reasoning behind SBTC. And then it was like, well, okay, to do that, these people or who stake STX, they need to run a node and they need to have liveness. And then sort of it dawned on everyone a bit like, hey, if people need, if nodes don't need to have liveness, or if STX stakers need to have liveness, just to be correct here, then well, they might as well just start validating blocks in between Bitcoin blocks, right? And then we can also make things fast. And then all of a sudden you're not just anchored to Bitcoin, but you're also very fast, and you have BTC on your chain, right? And then suddenly things start becoming very, very exciting, right? And that just becomes exciting for being able to offer these kind of experiences where people borrow against BTC or they earn yield on BTC, where it becomes very easy to move the BTC to the programming layer, do your yield bearing activity, go back to Bitcoin L1 or move it to the programming layer, borrow against BTC, move it out when you're done. But also sort of makes this role for stackers much more important in securing the network. I mean, they're not just securing a network, but they're also sort of securing a bridge in a way, right? So it's very, very big responsibility there. And yeah, then that's like where Stacking DAO then comes in, right? To make sure that that the network of stakers is decentralized, they're performing well, right? And so on, right? And that's like a sort of function that Stacking DAO can then there really fulfill. So yeah, in many ways, like the kind of things that I'm working on now is kind of to extend on the work that went into Nakamoto, and not just to make like kind of capture value, right, but also like kind of continue to build the infra in maybe more in kind of a commercial way to to make sure that the network can be as great as it can be.
Excellent. Thank you, Tycho. So you touched on stacking DAO and how it'll contribute to, staking, validating blocks, and basically adding additional utility to SBTC and utilizing SBTC. Let's take a look at Zest Protocol as well, which you also co-founded and is a lending protocol, on-chain lending protocol built for Bitcoin. I understand you're currently in private beta, and I'm curious to hear, just at a high level, how you plan to implement SBTC into this. I know that actually curious, like, will you only support SBTC as the only asset for lending? Or do you have plans to add additional assets in the Stacks ecosystem?
We have a bunch of assets right now, actually, in the private mainnet, which are maybe not sort of fully visible yet. But yeah, initially our idea was, okay, it's going to be fully for Bitcoin. It's only going to be with BTC, and we're going to launch it when SBTC is live. Right? And then I guess like everyone here, we were caught a bit by surprise. Like, oh, okay, people are actually kind of bullish. And people want leverage now, and then we're like, well, actually, it's not a bad idea to just deploy our contracts right now already. Like it makes sense to deploy our contracts already on chain and just do some lending on stacks, right? And then we can kind of grease the wheels of the contracts, and then once it's lending with BTC, then it's at least already tried and tested, right? And because it's a similar infrastructure. So that's what we did. So we launched a closed mainnet. I mean, there is like about 10 million TVL now. So people have been quite active depositing STX and borrowing against it. But yeah, so right now the main things that people can do on Zest Protocol is either borrow STX against STX, right? And that's like a great way to kind of go long on high beta assets to stacks, right? So like other tokens on the stacks network and so on. And there are ways to borrow stablecoins against STX, and that's again to kind of go long, but the borrowing capacity is a bit more limited there because there's not so much liquidity for stables on chain yet. And yeah, quite soon we're fully opening Zest Protocol to the public. But for anyone who'd want to play around, like if you just go to zestprotocol.com and you sort of do launch app, then and try to connect the Stacks wallet, then it will ask you to whitelist, request whitelist first, and we kind of process these like every couple of days, and we make announcements when we've let new folks on the app, and yeah, people can already take out some leverage on stacks to kind of play around in a bit more of a degen way, right? But usually things start off by degenning, and degenning is actually a way to make the infrastructure robust for when the real serious use cases are there.
So one last question here. I want to stick here. Stick with degenning, stick with types of assets you'll be supporting. One of the things, and I'm sure many of us in the audience are interested in, are, of course, like BRC20 assets and upcoming runes, new standards, new types of almost seemingly experimental, types of applications being built using these new tokens. As a founder, building a dApp in the Bitcoin landscape, really super curious to hear how you evaluate, how you look at these new types of novel assets. And at some point in the future, do you expect that Zest Protocol will be, or even stacking DAO will enable staking and or lending for these types of new assets? How are you looking at these?
Yeah, I mean, for stacking DAO to support other assets than STX for staking.
Well, basically at high level as a founder of sort of these two different types of protocols, right? So I guess mainly sticking with Zest Protocol because lending has more widespread applications for, different types of tokens. And then I see Andre has his hand up. So please, Andre, feel free to hop on anytime here. Yeah, I mean, how are you guys both looking at these new types of novel assets, right? We're talking about BRC20s and upcoming runes. Do you expect one day, Tycho, that you'll plan to add support for these on Zest Protocol?
I get it. I get it. I think Andre really wants to say something.
You can go first, Tycho, if you want, and then I can go after.
Sure thing, sure thing. Um, yeah, I think I mean, it's a space that I'm watching, but also I'm very heads down. So it's obviously, sometimes tricky to sort of, make sure you're fully synced up with everything. But yeah, I would say like, for runes and for BRCs and for ordinals, for them to sort of become, for them to sort of be interesting assets, it makes a lot of sense for them to be able to be bridged to a sort of more programmable environment, right? There are some things you can do with them on L1, which is, helpful, and allows you to do some sort of limited ways of borrowing and so on, and some swapping. But you kind of need to move them to L2, right, where essentially bridges are going to come in. And I think Andre has been doing some interesting work as well on sort of scoping out what that would look like to bring these assets to stacks, right? But that's sort of what I would be looking at, right? All these tokens. There's a lot of token standards coming. I mean, there's token standards on stacks. There's token standards on other chains. There's also inscriptions on stacks now. Maybe that's the way you bridge an inscription to as an inscription on stacks. So many things that people could think about. Um, and yeah, I think we're just kind of scratching the surface really of what's possible. But yeah, I'm very very excited on this whole like cross Bitcoin L2 L1 kind of bridging space, right? I've ever worked on SBTC. It's a tricky problem to get right, and and I think there's probably a lot of economic value that can be created there by the right teams. But Andre, enlighten us.
Yeah, well, I wanted to say two things quickly. First, I just wanted to give proper kudos to Tycho and just having him involved in like designing SBDC from a commercial standpoint has been invaluable. There's been certain things that he's been able to identify. I think one example that you might want to talk to later is like the use of the op drop function in Bitcoin for the deposit address for when users are depositing SBTC. I think this is a really good example of like having him as a founder in the space, also contributing back to core protocol development is really interesting. Basically, this enabled a couple of benefits. One is that you can deposit Bitcoin directly into a smart contract on the L2. So it just reduces the amount of steps and friction that users would take to access Bitcoin DeFi, and it opens up deposits from more custodial addresses and a broader range of users. So making this change was really interesting to see, and so we'll see some of those changes reflected when SBDC goes live. I just wanted to call that out as we were talking about some of the broader DeFi apps and Tycho's contributions there. But going back to runes and ordinals, I mean, I think the short answer is that I'm seeing a tremendous opportunity right now, basically for stacks to become like the best place to go and trade like runes and ordinals. And I think the thesis is the same as when you think about SBDC broadly, which is that on the Bitcoin L1, where most of this activity is happening, you're going to deal with higher fees, slower transaction times, and less expressive environments. So there is the opportunity, I think, for stacks to be like an early leader in this market. I think ordinals, for example, have already shown strong product market fit of being able to issue assets on the L1. But I think that we're going to see the trading activity happening on L2s. And so today, you can already trade BRC20s on stacks. I think the best place to do that is the Alex protocol, and they've built the X-Link bridge where you can go ahead and build that in. I know they have plans to support runes when that launches. And so, like if I don't know if everyone here is familiar with runes, but basically, the developer, the core developer of ordinals, Casey Rodomar, basically wants to build the best fungible token standard on Bitcoin to basically create like the best, in his words, quote unquote, shitcoin casino. So we know meme coins have, been really popular this year. So runes are basically an effort to build meme coins on Bitcoin in the best way possible. And so I do think that I do expect a lot of that trading to take place on the L2 just because of those limitations that I mentioned earlier. So watching that space super closely. And then I also think that when we start to look at ordinals activity, there's some work being done there too. So Tycho mentioned that early this year we started to see developers building stack space inscriptions. This was basically like a an early primitive to enable ordinals bridging onto stacks. So you could go to sordinals.com, similar to SBTC. And basically, the team behind this is building a way to bridge in your ordinals. So I think that, over the next few months, it's likely that we'll see, more standards develop for easy bridging of ordinals onto stacks. And as a result, we'll see more marketplaces sort of adopting this bridge, where the end result, again, is we'll start to see more of this ordinals activity taking place on stacks. So I'm super bullish on this as a trend. I think it'll pick up over this year, and excited to see the types of things that developers decide to build.
Could not agree with you more, Andre, on those thoughts. I completely agree. This is something that's super exciting for me. I mean, when we see innovation across the space, it's not always that we see the opportunity to build entirely new types of applications using these new types of assets, and maybe even seeing the intersection of all other asset standards, with these newer ones like like ordinals and runes. And so I'm super curious to see how this will evolve and how they'll connect and all be supported, or be I'm trying to find the right words here, be supported together within different types of applications and how they'll leverage each other. So it's actually a perfect segue into this next sort of part of the call that I wanted to get into, which is, I know you guys have worked together in the past. I know you guys are, good buddies here. So I want to open up the discussion a little bit. Instead of just asking you guys one-on-one questions, let's just do some general roundtable types of format here. And, the first question that I wanted to get into was exactly, again, just kind of addressing innovation. And so we just discussed a really new type of exciting vertical of innovation with these new standards, whether it's ordinals or runes, which Andre just described and got me super excited again about them. Other than this, what is it about, what are you guys both uniquely most excited about as stacks in the Bitcoin landscape evolve? So are there any new types of use cases that you see being built which are uniquely leveraging the capabilities of applications on Bitcoin? I mean, again, I know, Andre, and feel free, you guys, to kind of humble me here and dive back into the main parts, which is arguably, for developers, and Tycho referenced this well as also in that, developers should be focused on the security of it, and really the ability to access and unlock all of this liquidity of Bitcoin, in addition to these fundamental values. And arguments as to why to build on Bitcoin. Are there any new types of innovation that's really exciting you guys? And again, this is sort of an open roundtable part, so feel free to take a stab at it, either of you, if you wanna go first.
Yeah, Tycho, do you want to take this one first, or should I?
No, go for it. There's actually someone at my door, so it would be great if you could find it all.
Yeah, sure thing. I think for me, when we think about the opportunities around just bringing smart contracts to Bitcoin, it's really just like the core value prop is making Bitcoin a productive asset. So when I think about it, like over the past 5 years, Bitcoin did a really good job of developing this narrative of basically being digital gold, which I think has been really helpful as like a narrative standpoint. But basically, starting last year, we're really starting to transition out of that to a point where Bitcoin can really be a productive asset. So, I think just from things that I'm excited about that developers are building, there's a lot of just basic primitives that we need to start building right now to see a DeFi ecosystem really starting to flourish. And so, we're going to see a bunch of platforms to use Bitcoin as collateral. So there's one that I'm excited about called Hermetica, where you can use Bitcoin in their options vaults. Basically like any platform that's going to enable more yield generating opportunities on Bitcoin, I think is pretty exciting. And so that's probably like the first layer for this. And I mean, I went on like a bit of a tangent on ordinals and runes. I'm certainly seeing a lot of opportunities there. But yeah, that's kind of where I see like the biggest opportunities in the near term, and kind of where we're starting to see that sort of innovation. Actually, one thing that I will add is that just from the SBTC standpoint right now, I think one thing that we're always looking at is like, how can we ensure that SBDC can evolve over time, and we can continue to reduce the trust assumptions associated with the peg. And I think for a lot of folks in the Bitcoin ecosystem, developing this in a way to try to make it, as trust minimized as possible, ideally with the same trust assumptions as you would on the L1, that's really the holy grail for building on Bitcoin right now. I think that SBDC is a good step in that direction. It gets you close, but there's also new developments that are coming, new innovation to enable more trust minimized bridging. So there's a protocol that was the white paper was released towards the end of last year, called BitVM. And what BitVM does is it essentially is a set of rules or protocol that allow for more optimistic bridging functionality for Bitcoin. And so basically what this means is if you have a network of validators like what Stacks has, and they're all running the BitVM protocol, it basically works similar to what you would expect from an optimistic rollup on Ethereum today, where basically the Bitcoin withdrawal transactions would go through this like challenge period where any one of the validators that's online could essentially challenge the transaction to say that it was faulty. So similar to like fraud proofs, for example. And so basically what this does is it changes the security model for Bitcoin L2s and sidechains and bridges so that it's called a one of n security model, meaning you only have to trust one operator that's online. And I think that so far we've already started to see just a ton of experimentation. It's really catalyzed a lot of teams to start looking at this as like, okay, what is now possible to build on Bitcoin that wasn't because of this breakthrough. And so in Stacks, we recently started a working group. It's a cross ecosystem working group. I believe it got seeded with about $500,000 in funding to hire researchers to actually build this protocol. And so it's something that we're taking a close eye on. I think if you go to the Stacks Foundation website right now, you can look at the job posting there. This type of innovation is still early, but it's very promising. And so I think we're taking the approach of, we just want to be on the cutting edge of these sorts of innovations, and we're going to contribute to researching it and likely coding maybe some of it in the early stages, and then basically designing SBDC in a way that can evolve over time as these new breakthroughs happen. So that's one area of innovation on Bitcoin that I'm really excited about, and I think is generating a lot of enthusiasm from the Bitcoin builder community.
Oh, that's great. And I think maybe to add there a bit more, it's very, very infra focused and makes, very, very, good things to be looking at, right? Maybe to sort of chip in a little bit from the application perspective, or for any builders right now. I think DeFi is just going to be so big for this, right? I mean, BTC is like this prime asset that people want to use in finance, right? They want to buy the ETF, they want to do stuff with it, and but the real way to do finance is obviously to do it on chain, right? And to do it in a programmable way. And there's so much more BTC capital, so it's so much easier to bootstrap new protocols and do things. So yeah, I think like anything that has to, touches like DeFi with BTC is going to do very well. So that's definitely one. And then secondly, it's like it's bridging, right? When it comes to applications, of course, starting in L2 is probably a great idea. If you have some time on your hands, so you try starting a Bitcoin L2, you're worth 300 million already today. But in terms of bridging will also be very interesting, or cross-chain messaging, because it's even clunkier, right? Like all these L2s don't even have their own the same VM. They don't even have the same token standard, right? So it's kind of crazy. So if you're working in that space of like cross BTC L2, Bitcoin L1, bridging and messaging and so on, I think you're also going to do very well versus some of the incumbents that are just not so focused on this kind of landscape.
And it's a great segue. I actually wanted to pick your guys' minds on this in terms of actually specifically this bridging and connecting, stacks and to other Bitcoin L2s. How are you guys looking at this? Is there a sense of collaboration among teams and L2s that are building on Bitcoin, or is it still pretty competitive at this time? And sort of, I know it's still early stage, so you guys have been building out stacks for quite some time, but a lot of the other, I guess, growing competitors in that space are rather new. Andre, from the stacks perspective, how are you guys looking at this? Is the goal ultimately to be connected and have open bridges and messaging pathways or passageways and transfer protocols between all of these different chains, or kind of how do you envision this evolving over the future?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to start, I definitely think that the overall attitude that I'm sensing right now is very positive sum and collaborative in general. Like we were at ETH Denver earlier this year, and it was one of the most exciting conferences that I'd been to, because you have a lot of Bitcoin projects that are sort of early stages, and everyone's trying to collaborate with each other, and the energy there was just really really positive and positive sum. So I definitely think that all of these Bitcoin layers are going to need to be connected and have a good amount of cohesion between them. I think one sort of criticism that we often hear from the Ethereum ecosystem is that they have developed this really flourishing ecosystem of rollups and layer twos, but there's a lot of fragmentation that happens there. And so I do think that there is an interest from projects on the Bitcoin side to try to figure out, how do we solve this issue of fragmented liquidity, and how do we kind of collaborate to make sure that we have seamless messaging between ecosystems and things like that. And so, from the stack side, we want to work with everyone. We want to kind of be like the hub for this Bitcoin activity. And I think that I've seen that philosophy shared with builders where, stacks can be kind of like this middleware that connects Bitcoin to the broader DeFi ecosystem, and can integrate with other ecosystems. I think that there's a big opportunity there, and so yeah, definitely collaborative right now, and excited by this energy.
Awesome. Thank you, Andre, for the insights on that. That is great to hear. I was at ETH Denver as well, and definitely sort of had the same takeaways there. I mean, that's part of one of the greatest things of working in this space is that it's very openly collaborative space rather than like super competitive like Web2. I mean, at DIA especially, like our goal is to integrate and support as many dApps as possible. So we definitely value that perspective as well that you just expressed. I want to be conscious of the fact that we're coming up close on the hour here. So one last question for you guys, which is more so an outlook, like looking forward, more of a fun question here. And really, I just want to pick your brains on, how do you see the Bitcoin landscape evolving and growing over the next 5 years? I know it's a super broad question, so let me narrow it down a little bit. Obviously the narrative and the trend for building on Bitcoin is super strong and arguably even at its peak, like right now, today, right? Like every day it's seemingly getting stronger. And do you guys feel that the strength of this narrative will be sustained? Obviously you do as builders in this space, but like ultimately, is it possible that we see this sort of flippening? Would you guys make an argument where we may see more dApps on Bitcoin L2s than Ethereum L2s eventually? I kind of want to make this, how do you really see this evolving at large, over the next 5 to 10 years, and the opportunity for growth that you see ahead of us in this space? Maybe Tycho, yeah, I see you're willing to comment on this one.
Yeah, I would really look at like some sort of a metric of amount of BTC deployed, right, on L2s. I think that's kind of what sort of the first flippening is. Like that needs to be more than BTC deployed on Ethereum L2s, right, or on other chains in general, Solana and so on. I think that's like probably the first sort of real validation that this space really needs to unlock. And then once that's happened, I would think like then like a lot more people are sort of going to wake up to the opportunities here, right? I would think that sort of a next potential flippening is like I mean there's still a long way to go, right? But I would look at the amount of BTC bridged, then reaching the same amount of a TVL of like ETH on DeFi apps or something like that, right? Or ETH that's bridged onto L2s. And I think then sort of once that's like kind of closed, then we're really talking, right? And it could be a multi-cycle thing, right? It's not like something that maybe all has to happen tomorrow, right? We're all very excited, which is great. There's a lot of L2s coming live. It's also going to be a lot of scams, right? A lot of things that look like TVL that are maybe not TVL. A lot of things that look like Bridge BTC, which is more that, people have just moved BTC to another sub account in the custodian, and suddenly it counts as bridged somewhere, and it's it's TVL for a new chain, right? I mean, not naming any names there, but you see sort of some weird things every now and then. So also be aware. Make sure that you sort of don't sort of blindly ape into things. Ask your friends, do your own research. Right? Be careful out there, because it's going to get frothy for sure. And these things take time, right? Like it can take a while. Like it takes time to build really good infrastructure. It takes time to build really good apps. It takes time to build really great communities of developers. And yeah, we're getting there, but step by step. So that's kind of the first milestones I would look out for. But not sure, Andre, if are you measuring something specifically, or for SBTC, the Nakamoto upgrade, that you have in mind? Okay, this is like the big KPI that you're running at.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly track Bitcoin TVL as an important metric of overall network health. So I think you're spot on there. I mean, the general way that I think about this outlook and how it all sort of develops, it's like right now we're seeing a ton of capital come into the Bitcoin space, largely driven by these ETFs and new institutional actors. I think that this capital is starting to find its way into like startups and protocols that are building, like we talked about earlier, ordinals and runes. And what that's going to do is basically increase the overall fee environment for Bitcoin. So I think as these protocols really start to pick up steam, we're going to be in a higher transaction fee environment that will probably sustain over the coming years. And so that's really when we're going to start to feel the pain on the L1, because it's going to price out a lot of usage, right? Like you're not going to want to buy an ordinal or send the transfer if the fee starts to become too outrageous. And so I think that is going to just push more of the activity to the L2. And so we're going to see a lot there. And I think that is ultimately the case for Bitcoin L2s crossing, 100 billion market cap over the next 5 years, for example. And I think that so we're going to continue to see probably more Bitcoin L2s proliferate, more applications that are building, and yeah, I think looking at like how much Bitcoin is actually transacting on the L2 and what is the overall usage, are certainly things that I'm watching as like a key metric for this space.
Super interesting. It's almost like this positive feedback loop where the more activity drives more congestion on the chain, and higher transaction fees drive more activity to L2, which creates more activity that's ultimately settling on the base layer. Really interesting perspective there from both of you guys. Thank you for sharing. I mean, again, this is sort of like the perfect time to have this call and to just be like at the forefront of this space, at the forefront of innovation here, in on top of everything that's being built. I want to thank you guys both for joining today. You guys are definitely OG builders in this space, and to hear your insights is very valuable for myself and our community here on the Bitcoin Dialogues episodes. I guess one last question, and then I want to actually just push to you guys for any closing thoughts and best ways to stay in touch. Andre, Tycho, when is the Nakamoto release? When is the release of that scheduled?
Yeah, so we actually just picked block height. So the first phase of Nakamoto will be on approximately April 16th. So this is when the signers can begin onboarding to the network. There will be about 2 cycles where we're basically onboarding signers, and then the Nakamoto rules will go into effect likely middle of May. So yeah, it's coming down to the wire.
Nice. Yeah, super exciting time. I mean, that's a huge upgrade, a huge release. I know you guys have been working and developing for quite some time here. So and really excited to see the use cases that are unlocked from this. In how SBTC furthermore will be adopted across not just stacks, but as you mentioned, potentially being the gateway of, Bitcoin liquidity for even other L2s in the future. So at that, Tycho, Andre, thank you again. For anybody in the audience who wants to take next steps, whether they're a builder or a community member, ready to give out, ready to get their hands dirty and start testing out some of the applications, what can they do to take next steps and stay up to date with both Zest stacking and stacks? Maybe Tycho, any call to actions or resources that you can refer us to?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You definitely want to be following at Zest Protocol on Twitter, and there, if you launch the app, connect your wallet, you can request early access to deposit and start using leverage on stacks, right? And there might be something special in store there, right? Who knows? But yeah, that's one thing to think about. And then you also want to have a look at Stacking DAO, where it's like the easiest route into DeFi on stacks. When people have STX, it's pretty easy to mint some STX there and earn the stacking yield, right? So not, if you're long STX, you wanna make sure you get more STX for your STX, right? And yeah, so that's like the two things I obviously would recommend people to do to kind of dip their toes into and to check out.
And to maybe even give your personal handle a follow. Like you said, you had that nice tweet yesterday, the thread about SBTC.
By all means. I mean, I assumed everyone had already done that. But, yeah, that was a very good recommendation for all the latest alpha on stacks.
Excellent. Yeah. Very good content over there. How about over from you, Andre? Any call to actions or resources?
Yeah, I think the best place is I publish a regular newsletter called Bitcoin Rights. You can go to bitcoinrights.com, stay up to speed on all Stacks core development and SBDC progress. And follow me and follow the Stacks handle here that's listening in as well. And yeah, I think that's probably the best place to go for now.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. Last show from my end is we also just pinned to the top of the spaces here the Bitcoin ecosystem map, which is a map that our community has collectively collaborated to create that highlights all of the significant players in the Bitcoin landscape. And it's sort of this, helping layer of added value to these Bitcoin dialogue sessions. This is a very fast moving, I guess, vertical, the Bitcoin landscape. And so we want to be as on top of it as possible. So I want to thank Tycho and Andre for joining in today, sharing insights from their OG building perspective in this space about, everything that they've been building and everything that they're excited for as we see this space evolve. Really valuable insights. Thank you guys again for joining. Thank you everybody in the audience who joined in today. We hope to see you guys in the next episode of Bitcoin Dialogues. Feel free to give us a follow at Dia if you're interested in more of these in the future. And at that, thank you again, everybody. I wish you guys a happy rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. And take care.